I think Nick Sirianni said something that was quite significant during the first week of training camp for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think it was in relation to the way that he did a player comparison for Dontavian Wicks. And what this is really about, guys, is how they're going to play out of 3-by-1 in bunch formations, and kind of this mystery and this ideal of who's going to play on the boundary side, who's going to be your X, your split end, X-aligned boundary receiver. And I know when you hear terms like split end and flanker, a lot of times these coaches will tell you that, well, that's kind of like old school terminology that we don't use anymore. We just see them as outside and inside wide receivers. I understand the things that coaches say, and I also know they're full of shit sometimes. Because let me tell you, I got some oceanfront property for your ass if you think that A.J. Brown was not the primary X-aligned boundary side split end wide receiver in the Philadelphia Eagles offense over the last 4 seasons. Yes, they would use them and they would mix them up here and there, but I mean, we can see percentages of the roles, and it's very obvious that what each guy was. So in this system, you have to ask yourself a question. Is Nick Sirianni just paying lip service, or is he telling you something? Because the player he compared him to is Keenan Allen, formerly here of Greensboro, North Carolina, where I'm at, guys. This is a really, really good player, and I understand the player comp from a physical comparison, right? Both 6'1", 6'2"-ish, both between 205 and 210 in the weight. Both of them, 32 inches plus in the arm reach, 10-inch hands. There's a certain type of body profile to them. But when I think of Keenan Allen, I do think of a guy that has inside-outside versatility, not outside-inside. However, when I went back to look at his rookie season in 2013, where a little unknown coach by the name of Nick Sirianni was the quality control coach, and you had his big mentors there, Mike McCoy, a West Coast guy, the whole formation of the ideas and the principles of the West Coast offense as Nick knows them, more than likely comes from Mike McCoy. And then you had 2 of his other kind of big figureheads that were kind of mentors to Nick Sirianni. Ken Wisenhunt as the offensive coordinator, Frank Reich as the quarterback coach for that team.
On the first possession of the night, Rivers in the pocket, he slings.
You had a season where the Chargers had a bounce back, okay? That was their first winning season since, I want to say 2010 or something like that. And then you had Phillip Rivers becoming the comeback player of the year for the NFL. And then I think even Keenan Allen ended up winning some kind of an award himself. I don't remember if it was Offensive Rookie of the Year or what it was, but he actually either set some records or won an award. I want to say that he was one of the first receivers in Chargers history to get over, 800 yards or something like that, guys. He'd actually produced and did things that were special in that season. What I find significant about the statement is that when I went back and reviewed the percentage of usage and was looking at the tape, oh boy, Keenan Allen played a shit ton outside. A.J. Brown level outside. Now, they used him both as kind of a boundary side, split end, X-line guy, and also as a flanker, playing towards the field side. They were mixing and matching their receivers outside like that. But with that said, he didn't play the slot the way that he has, become known for, basically, right? When I think of Keenan Allen, I think about a style of player that's kind of beckons to a Devontae Adams, right? These guys that are really good route runners. They don't have an exceptional tested 40 times, but they just route your ass up and they can play inside outside. Puka Nacua is a bigger, stronger guy, but very similar. Can play outside, makes his money on the inside, absolutely destroying teams, right? That's how I always thought of him. So when I heard the comparison given to essentially a player that early on did play a lot outside, but has, of late played a lot more inside, I was like, oh, that's a very interesting comparison that Nick Sirianni is making here. And we all know that, you look at a guy like Dontavian Wicks, he played more inside percentage of snaps than even Keenan Allen did last year, to be honest. With that said, I think what's unique here is that Keenan Allen, I would say, comes from a tier of wide receiver that is closer to a guy like Jordy Nelson, formerly of the Green Bay Packers, Jordy Nelson, right? He's that style of receiver more so than he is the style of receiver as a player like Pierre Garçon, formerly of the Washington Redskins, now called the Commanders. You guys get what I'm saying, right? I mean, I kind of envisioned originally the role of Dontavian Wicks being more like Pierre Garçon. And I didn't, the comparison to kind of Keenan Allen, where I get where it's coming from, I was like, that's interesting. That's an interesting take to have here, right? Because I think what you have to like kind of recognize and look at for the Philadelphia Eagles is, and what they're showing you in training camp, you're going to get a mix and a match of systems. Ken Wisenhunt and a guy like Frank Reich, while they know the West Coast system and they utilize West Coast principles inside of their own systems as they separate it from Mike McCoy, who was a true West Coast guy, they're also known for mixing and matching things. And what they would do is they would mix and match together things such as like the Earhart-Perkins or, even like the Air Coryell systems in with West Coast principles, right? You got to think about who Ken Wisenhunt worked with from the quarterback position, right? Kurt Warner. After Kurt Warner, who did he work with, guys? He worked with Ben Roethlisberger. After Ben Roethlisberger, who did he work with? He worked with Phillip Rivers. Like, you got to think about the style of offense that they were trying to bring together. So they used a combination of outside zone and stretch and pitch, and they blended that and mixed it almost to a 50-50 with like power and gap stuff. You could see some of the traditional run game stuff of the Earhart-Perkins where you play a lot of power kind of blended in with these West Coast systems where you see these guys running a little bit more finesse in the run game. And I think a good way of looking at this is, if you remember for some of my older members of this community, guys, if you guys remember Steve Mariucci's divergence from Bill Walsh's system, it was around trying to be more physical in the run game and not be such a finesse team in the run game, right? Steve Mariucci would have gotten along very well with Nick Sirianni because, boy, he was a firm believer in one like big time statement. You run to close games out. You get physical. You beat their you-know-what in the trenches. That's what Steve Mariucci based his kind of system, that his variation of Bill Walsh's West Coast system around, right? That's what he took with him to Detroit, if you will. And then you do have like these big time, like, X-aligned receivers. And I think a lot of people forget the criticism that rung true about Kyle Shanahan for a while. And I think it was unwarranted because if you think about the level of player he was working with, of course he was force-feeding the X receiver in his systems. But, for a long time they were pointing out like Andrew Johnson, Pierre Garçon, Julio Jones in Atlanta, like how he was force-feeding these X-aligned receivers. But they leave out context, right? Because that's not completely true, because he's also worked with George Kittle and Deebo Samuel being, kind of not a very unusual type player, right? So, I think it's more complex than that, guys. He also fed his running backs quite a bit. You get into the Tevin Colemans and stuff like that, guys. Like, he definitely fed his running backs inside the passing game. So I don't think it was as easy as what people are saying. But nonetheless, like, that was a criticism, that was a critique. I don't care about how you feed the target allocations. Like, I don't think it's an easy statement like that. I'm talking about conceptually today, guys. When you're in a 3-by-1, okay, it doesn't have to be a bunch, just 3-by-1, whether it's a bunch, whatever, right? And you got the one side, the guy who is probably going to play, mind you, you can play a 3-by-1 and the 3-by side basically be to the actual boundary. It doesn't have to be to the field side, although normally it is to the field side because the point of it is to utilize space. But you're talking about the one side that's playing towards the boundary, right? What we traditionally would call the X-aligned, kind of boundary wide receiver, right? The split end X-line boundary receiver. Think of the A.J. Brown role for many years here in Philadelphia, right? Who plays that role now? I think that's the interesting part, because you can make arguments around several people, and you can even make the argument, Steve, I think the answer to it, or the solution to what you're bringing up, which is unique and interesting, is it's going to be blended. They're going to blend the hell out of it. Possibly. But you got a guy like Devontae Smith, right? A little underweight. He put on some muscle. You could make the argument that's why he's doing this, is he knows he's got to get stronger. But at the same time, how often are guys getting pressed in a modern NFL game, guys? I'm talking about not manned up on. I'm talking about man coverage with a damn press technique at the line of scrimmage. How often do you think that's happened? 2-3 times a game maybe on teams that are like crazy, physically, athletically gifted at the cornerback position? I think people are worrying about nothing. It's much ado about nothing. I don't think it's like, yes, once or twice in the season, you might have an embarrassing clip comes out where a dude gets manhandled because he's a little underweight. But most teams don't want to do that, because if a dude uses like a step back technique on you or a speed release on you and you miss with your hands, you're cooked. You're freaking toast if you do that. So you can use a guy like Devontae Smith, where the point and the emphasis is to put my best route runner, my guy that does have some vertical stretchability to his game, to actually beat a team's best corner, right? A guy that we want to try to take advantage of because we think we got the better player. You can do that in terms of that being your boundary and a 3-by-1 set. You can use the Dontavian Wicks, a guy that you feel like is strong. Go ahead and try to press Dontavian Wicks. He's got the physical body structure to beat, press. He can run through you on that. He can hand fight with you. You can use that type of guy that, yes, a big portion of what you're trying to do on the boundary, guys, is you're trying to get outside the numbers and vertical to create the spacing for the 3x1 set, right? If you want to attack in between the numbers, and especially from that bunch or from that 3x1 side of things, well, then you need that guy that's playing on the boundary, that's the 1x side, to space the defense, to create the opportunities. He's got to get outside and win vertically, right? But from occasion, on time to time, he's got to break inside, right? You got to utilize him to where you're spacing with the 3x1 set to space it out. So that way, the guy on the backside who has an advantage against the corner can beat you on slants, can beat you on deep ins, hitches, comeback, curls, so forth and so forth, guys. Things that are, post, things that are going to be towards and inside the numbers, if you will, right? Using that guy to win and having a dude that has a little bit of size to him, right? A dude that is 6'1", 6'2"-ish. A guy that does have a 205 to 210 in the body, structure and weight, right? A guy that is over 32 inches in the arm reach, has 10-inch hands, right? You're utilizing that traditional boundary guy, the guy we would call a boundary receiver, although those terms are mostly dead in the modern NFL. That's where I think Dontavian Wicks makes a shit ton of sense playing that role, right? And then you have the argument of like, well, what about a speed guy? Hollywood Brown can play as a boundary player. He's not completely like, this is not a 150-pound player. He's got a little, he's not a 210-pound player either, but this is a guy that the one attribute he gives you is that he's fast. He can run coverage off. He can be a deep shot guy from that side, from the backside of your offense, right? He can play that. I mean, I don't know how much you're going to utilize him on, slants and how much he'll be utilized on things such as like, I could see a post because, he could separate between the safety and the corner, but you get what I'm saying. Like there's some inside route concepts outside of like hitches, comebacks, curls, and stuff like that to where maybe he's not the best suited for. He could do that because he can create separation at the top of the routes then with his speed. But you don't want him working in the middle of the field like on an in route a whole lot. He's not that type of player, right? That's more the Dontavian Wicks. But what he can do is release outside on you, must get outside and get vertical. He could definitely be that player that spaces the field for the bunch. That's the thing that I think like Nick is kind of revealing a little bit about. He might be tipping his hand a little bit about the way that he's potentially viewing certain aspects of the offense. And mind you, they're not only going to play 3x1 guys. They will play 2x2. There's going to be some very unique things that happen offensively. I definitely think that from my perspective, and mind you, I could be wrong because we haven't seen it produced on the field yet, guys. It's got to be produced on the field. I do think from my perspective, you're going to get a blending of gap and power mixed in with split flow. I don't think you should remove split flow from the offense, but I think they're going to try to pull back on it a little bit, right? They don't want Jalen Hurts taking as many hits, but split flow, RPO basically is another way of saying split flow. Split flow means tight ends kind of coming across formation to kick out essentially on an edge, and then Jalen's probably going to be reading the other, defensive end, and then you got the option to either hand the ball off, take the ball if you're Jalen Hurts, or even potentially pass the ball. You got that RPO split flow stuff going on. I think all that's going to be tied together with the newness of the offense, which is the toss, which is the outside zone, which is the stretch plays. Those things that are Shanahan-esque, right? We were already running those. We had those on the tape last year. I've showed you guys in a few videos that these things have existed for a while here in Philadelphia. This isn't exactly brand new, but we're talking about getting guys in here who know how to run it. We're talking about getting the Sean Mannion's in here. We're talking about getting, the Ryan Mahaffey's in here. We're talking about getting, Chris Cooper in here for the offensive line coach. Like getting guys in here who know how to make sure our execution is better on these things. And then expanding the offense into that. That's kind of what I'm looking at. And I think Nick has tipped his hand a little bit unintentionally there. Now, we could see the reporting, guys. The reporting's all they've been all over it. Like, hey man, they're coming out in 12 personnel. They're coming out, here you go. It's a toss to Saquon, first play of 11 on 11s. Yeah, I think you're going to see that kind of stuff, guys. Like, I definitely think that's going to be a part of the offense. It's going to be blended. It's going to be mixed. I'm curious, man. I'm excited to see the offense. All the discontent that was being kind of out there, that was being placed out there by people in the spring. Mind you, guys are learning the playbook for the first time, guys. They're going over the core components of it. Of course, they're going to be behind the defense that's playing in the same system, basically. We see that the defense is hella good, and the defense is still winning the day, but the offense is showing you fight. I'm so damn curious what the offense is going to look like in these preseason games and then also in the joint practice. I'm so looking forward to that New England Patriots joint practice for many reasons. One reason is, does the offense get after the Patriots defense's ass a little bit? That I'm going to be curious to see kind of how that works its way out. And by the way, I don't want the Eagles to just dominate every single practice in terms of offensively, because then I don't think you're learning. I don't think you're growing. I think people have to understand that practice is meant to have losing reps. How the hell do you get better, guys, if you're always winning? That means that there's an underlying problem somewhere. Like you're going to have to hear that they lose some shit here and there in terms of the reps. That's what you want. But what you got to look at is the little teeny tiny details they're forgetting to exclude from us. Right? Mekhi Lemon's an interesting one. What is Mekhi Lemon's role going to be in this offense? We heard so far that in 11 personnel, he comes in, he plays the slot. Okay? But you can't permanently do that. Right? You know, Dontavian Wicks and Devontae can play either outside role. Right? You got Johnny Wilson, who could potentially make the roster here. You know, Darius Cooper's already making plays. How about Darius Cooper, guys? Holy hell. Like, you know, I'm curious, Mekhi Lemon, does it expand as he starts getting some snaps outside? Because I think if you can get the flexibility from each of these receivers, I think it makes your offense really hard to pick up on, right? I mean, you can make some assumptions like, oh, shit, if Hollywood Brown's out there, they're probably trying to outside release and get deep on us. And, you know, they're probably trying to stretch us out, but we can't lose that rep, because if Hollywood Brown gets a step or two on somebody, he's probably walking into the end zone on a vertical shot, you know, from the Eagles here. Like, it's shit like that, right? You know what I mean? Like, I'm so curious how it's all going to get structured. All right, guys, I'm going to jump off of here because the baby's been as content as she's going to be, and it's about to start disrupting the video, I promise you, because she hears me talking. So with that said, if you guys want more, if you guys want me to expand upon this and talk, you know, show you some videos where I talk about some of the stuff from the Shanahan system that's already been done in Philly that, you know, we're trying to execute better on, I'll put you up a couple videos. I'll put you up a video right here that kind of deals maybe a little bit more so with the realm of, you know, Sean Mannion's role, and like we'll do something like reduced splits. And we'll talk about the importance of reduced splits to the offense. And then over here, I'll throw you up something that was probably more so about a player evaluation, but inside of that player evaluation, if you pay attention to what I'm trying to tell you about the position group and the player, you're going to learn a shit ton about like what we were doing last season and what we're trying to prove upon this season by running the Shanahan stuff, you know, incorporating it more into the offense, if you will. All right, y'all, I appreciate y'all's time and attention so much, guys. Thank you all so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing on these videos, man. It means the world to me. And all y'all that are hitting the hype button, it helps, man. It helps promote these videos, and you guys are awesome. I appreciate y'all for doing that. With that said, man, peace. I'm out of here.